Barbara, welcome to Preparing for ET Contact. Today is February 2nd, 2023. And I have my co-host here with me, Brian Rue. And we are very excited to introduce our guest, Barbara Lamb, today. Barbara is an icon and a pioneer in the UFO community. In addition to being a UFO and crop circle researcher, Barbara is a world-class hypnotherapist who has regressed thousands of people to recover their ET experience, memories, and past lives since she began this work in 1984. She is also a co-author of several books, including a children's book to help them understand their ET experiences, and her books can be found on Amazon. Without further delay, it's my pleasure and honor to introduce Barbara and welcome her to the group today. And Barbara, thank you so much for joining us. We are so looking forward to a very interesting discussion today.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here. And I would like to add a little addendum to that nice introduction. If somebody would like a signed copy of any of my 4 books, the better way to order them is to go to my website. There's a facility for ordering through the website, and you pay through PayPal. And the website is Barbara Lamb Regressions.com. So that would be a better way, actually.
Very good.
Yes.
Very good. Great. Great. Well, Barbara, maybe you could just start us off with telling us a little bit about how you got started in this industry, in this business. Obviously, it's taken a turn of its own into a very unique career path. So maybe kind of start us off with what got you started in this.
Okay. Well, I became a licensed psychotherapist back in 1976 without any awareness of UFOs or extraterrestrials or anything off planet at all, and was working along for several years and became involved in past life regression therapy and was trained in that for 5 years in the 1980s. And at the last module of training, the trainer woman said that those of us who were doing regression therapy could possibly have it happen that someone would come to us with a complaint or even with the trauma of having been visited by very unusual beings who were not human, and they were perhaps taken away here and there for a couple of hours, and they, would never remember very much about what had happened during that missing time, and they would want to have a regression to find out the details. So that was a real shock to me to hear that, because I didn't know there was such a thing as those beings for real, and UFOs and all of that, and the experiences that people were having with them. So right after the training woman mentioned that, I heard a big voice in my head which said, "Pay attention to this, Barbara. You will be doing this." So I was doubly shocked and thought, oh my goodness, I better find out if I think this is really real. So I did some reading when I could find it and hearing a couple of speakers and talk about this sort of thing. And by 1991, I decided one day in the shower that, I could, if anybody would ever come to me, I don't think they will, but if anybody ever did, I think I could handle it with the regression techniques that I've already been doing for several years now. We just wouldn't go into a past life. We'd go into something that happened in this life. So that started it, that thought. And because 2 hours later, I met the woman who referred my first client to me for regression for that purpose. That was a young woman who'd been terribly traumatized by having these unusual visitors of different kinds appearing in her room at night and taking her away for a couple of hours. And sometimes they'd come during the daytime even. And she was really distressed and wanted to know something more about it than what she could consciously remember. So we did 6 regressions over a period of 6 weeks. And she just turned out to feel very happy, actually, about the contacts that she'd had, because in many cases they had really helped her. In fact, they had healed her of two different afflictions that she had had. And so she was feeling very grateful for them, even though they were very unusual. But anyway, that was a wonderful start for me in doing this work. And then I thought, well, if anybody else wants to come for this sort of reason, having these unusual visitors, now I do feel confident, really, in managing it and helping them with that. And then, within 3 months or so, another person came for that kind of work, and another, and another, and another. And it's been a few thousand people now, and probably about 6,000 regressions that I've done. Some people have come many times for many regressions, and some come just one time. But anyway, it has been a fantastic journey, and I feel very, very honored and blessed to be able to be of help to people who have those kinds of experiences.
That's amazing. I mean, at some point you obviously realized I'm onto something here, right? And this is taking on a life of its own.
Yes, which I had never previously expected. Like most people, I had seen the movie E.T. and absolutely loved it, and thought, oh, wouldn't it be nice if there were some little beings like that out there? But I didn't think there were. I thought that was fiction. And then when I saw Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I thought, wow. I was very, very moved at the end of that movie when you could see some beings coming off the landed UFO, and then the men returning from a visit they had had, which turns out to be true. Some of our pilots went to Planet Serpo, and in the 1970s, I think it was 80s, and but I thought all of that was science fiction, but was very, very moved by it, but never dreaming that this was real. That there really is a universe full of many, many beings of varying types and different whole civilizations and on different planets and even in different dimensions of reality. That's something I had not known about at that time either when I first got into this. So it's really opened up in so many directions that have been very, very fascinating. And the most important thing is that it's been really helpful for the people who have these experiences and have been able to come to me and have a regression, either in person or on Zoom or Skype. And, to really find out the details. And always they report feeling better after having had the regression, no matter what happened during that experience. They just feel better for knowing what it was. And as a psychotherapist, I certainly am aware that when there's something that's kind of lodged in the subconscious part of the mind, and it might be bothering us, sort of festering away for many years in some cases, that if that, whatever that material is that's buried there in the mind but bothering the person, when that comes up into conscious awareness, recollection and awareness, there is a relief factor that kicks in. And then they can work with it, they can think about it, they can write about it, they can talk about it, they can release it in some ways if it's been traumatic. And in many cases, these visits are not traumatic. They're a surprise, but many people report that they were wonderful experiences, inspiring experiences. So, of course, it depends on which beings have been visiting them and taking them away for an hour or two. And but even some of the ones that appear to be more negative, such as a lot of the physical examinations that people are subjected to, that even in many of those cases, those examinations turn out to be very helpful for the person because the beings will either detect something going wrong in the person's body, like maybe a failing liver or problem with a kidney or a spleen or something that the person may not have really known about. They might have felt some discomfort, but they might not know what it is. And the beings in that case will advise the person to go to their doctor when they go home again and have that checked. And with the people I know who that happened to, when they came home and had a diagnosis from their Earth medical doctor, that they found out that they did indeed have that problem that the beings had said. And then even more astonishing, I think, is that in many cases, when the beings find something wrong in the person's body during one of these examinations, the beings will just go right ahead and heal it right then and there on the ship. And so the person might not be aware exactly of what's going on, but they usually are aware of some kind of light being applied to them, like sort of like a roller of light going over them, or light shining down from an instrument, or being surrounded or filled with light, or whatever. Different beings have different methods, but they have had some really serious conditions absolutely healed by the extraterrestrials in some of those visits. So that is very impressive, very wonderful, I think.
Absolutely. I can imagine, with having done thousands of regressions for people over time, that you've probably heard some interesting things and had some interesting stories come out. Is there anything that stands out to you that comes to the forefront of your mind when it comes to the different regressions you've done that is an interesting story that you'd like to share?
Oh, wow. Out of all of those, yes, well, there's a young woman, thinking of the healing theme, a young woman who came for a regression. And when she was around age 20 and was working in a regular job, she came home one day and she felt very tired and just thought, oh, I'll just lie down on the sofa for a little while. Well, 3 days later, she woke up with the telephone ringing near her, and a voice, one of her coworkers, was saying, well, what's happened to you? Where are you? We haven't seen you for 3 days. Are you all right? And of course, this young woman had no possible sense that 3 days had passed by without her being awake and being aware of it. And so then she realized, well, something has definitely happened, and I don't know what it is. But anyway, years later, she found me and came for a regression. And in the regression, it turned out that the beings came after she had become very sleepy and wanted to lie down on the sofa. In fact, they made her be very sleepy so she would not be consciously aware. And they came and they took her up onto a UFO. And first of all, they put her in what looked like some sort of horizontal tubular machine, similar in many ways, she recognized later, as our MRI machines. And so they did a scan of her body, and then they rolled her out of that, took her into another room and suspended her in the air. She estimated that as she was looking down from being suspended in a prone position. She estimated she was probably about 6 feet off the floor. And there were beings standing around there under her. And there were a lot of lights, like about a pencil thickness of light, like laser lights of many different colors. And they were coming from all angles, coming from the ceiling and the walls and the floor, coming and penetrating her body. She was actually being healed in that process. And one of the beings said to her, "We are doing this because you have not been aware of it, but you have a serious blood disorder. And we are trying to stop that blood disorder from advancing any further. So we are doing this healing process with you. And so we cannot undo the damage that has already been done, but we are stopping it from progressing anymore." So that's what they were doing. And then they returned her, and she woke up with a phone call, not having had any awareness whatsoever of that whole experience. All she knew was that she'd gone to sleep for a little nap and then was awakened 3 days later. And in the meantime, she had been somewhere very different, having that unusual process happen. Well, then, several years later, she went to her Earth medical doctor, and they checked her heart. And the doctor validated that she did have an unusual blood disorder. But he said, the amazing thing with this is that you probably had this for quite a number of years, and it should have advanced a lot further than it has. It seems to have been a problem for quite a while, and now it's been dormant for a long time. So that sort of matched what she, even years after that, found out in the regression. So I think that was a wonderful example. And that particular woman has had for many years, has had a very, very positive sense about extraterrestrial beings without having realized that she herself had that experience and had other experiences with them as well. So one thing that I find out, which is interesting to me, is that when a person is aware of one encounter that they have had with the beings, that sort of opens the door, it seems, in their memory, so that they can remember, other events too, or other times. You see, these people who experience these things usually have them happen over a period of years. And they may start early in childhood, they usually do. And they may happen again in the teenage years and young adult years, middle adult years, and so on. And so once they sort of get hold of, in other words, remember the details through regression of an experience, then that sort of helps them to think about other peculiar events that happen in their lives. It might have been a missing time experience, for instance. Many people have those. They're quite common when a person will be driving along and they know that it's going to take another hour before they get home, but actually they don't get home for about 3 hours, and often in that kind of experience, as they were driving along, they've seen something peculiar, like an unusual light over there in the field, or an unusual light or craft up in the air, in the sky. And they might even feel that they're followed by that light, or that the light is right overhead for a while. In any event, it turns out that the light turns out to be a craft and has come close enough to take them, sometimes even with their car, but take them for an experience, and they get to their destination, maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours later than they would have. And they thought they should have, certainly. So missing time is one of those things that people might remember back on and think, oh, I wonder if that was one of those experiences. Or that, many people wake up with unusual markings on their body, and they don't know how those markings got there. It might be like little pinprick marks in a straight line, or in a perfect circle, or pinprick marks in a perfect triangle, or a triangle bruise, or a straight white scar, or a scoop mark taken out of their skin. I mean, there are all kinds of markings. Sometimes they look like fingertip bruises. And I have seen so many of those markings on people's bodies, and people also send me photographs of them. I think it's great when they do take photographs of them, because often those markings disappear. But anyway, the markings are helpful, I think, in the sense that they bring the person's attention to the fact that, something mysterious has been happening. And they wonder, sometimes for many, many years, wonder, what was that? How did that get there? Or why did I wake up that morning and my clothes were inside out? And yet I know I had put them on right side out when I got into bed last night. Or maybe they'll wake up and the clothes are put on upside down. Or even in a few cases that I know about, they wake up with somebody else's clothing on. And that clothing does not belong to anybody in their family. I remember one woman whom I was aware of with that sort of thing years ago. She woke up with a T-shirt on that had a Japanese label. In other words, it wasn't just a Japanese shirt made here. It actually had come from Japan, and she's had no access to anything like that. And yet that's what she was wearing. So sometimes the beings do not have great accuracy in putting the right clothes back on the right person. So anyway, there are a number of clues like those and others that people have often wondered about. And it's a very typical thing that a person might wake up in the middle of the night with some sort of light, unusually coming right in through the window into the room. And, we normally, when unusual things happen, I think that we humans try to make sense of it. So people will think, oh, well, that must have been the headlights of a car driving by. But then why did the light stay in there for a few minutes and move around in the room? Or they might be aware that there are beings in the room, and the beings might be a few feet away, or they might be right there by the bed. There might be one, there might be two, there might be a small group of beings. And usually there's enough night light in a bedroom so that, through the window, that they could kind of make out the size and shape and form of the beings. And they realize after a while that, those are not humans. I don't know what they are, but they're not humans. And of course, that's rather startling and alarming. And so very often a person will have fear with that because it's totally unknown. and it doesn't seem to be right that that sort of thing is happening. So once in a while, though, they will wake up and there will be a being standing there who's sort of glowing with a beautiful, soft light around the being. And it has a feeling of being a very special, spiritual sort of being, and yet not one of the spiritual or religious figures that we're accustomed to seeing. But still, there will be a being who seems to be glowing with light and seems to be very calming and very loving. And it's still a mystery, but the person is, of course, sort of baffled by what that is and what's happening and what's going to happen next. And of course, it's very typical that when visitors like this are in the room, that the person is not able to move or call out or do anything except move the eyes. People do seem to move their eyes. And then anybody else who might be in the room, even sleeping in the same bed, is completely what we call switched off. In other words, they're completely unaware. It's not like they're harmed in any way. They just are made to be completely unconscious of anything going on in the bed or in the room. And the beings have a way of doing this. They have a way of coming and entering through our walls, or maybe becoming non-physical for a bit and then reappearing in a more physical form in the room. That seems to happen a lot. And they have these abilities to make anybody else in the room be totally unaware. And they also usually make the person be unaware after that first very few moments of the person waking up and being aware that they are there. And I have heard beings say that this is a really decent way to be visiting a person and taking a person, is to have them be as little aware of it as possible, because they know that we get very emotional, we humans, and we can get very concerned, very objecting, very traumatized. And so they want to do whatever they're going to do, but they don't want to make a big fuss for us. So the less we are aware of these actions by them, the better. And I think that that's understandable, although many people I have worked with say, well, why won't they let me remember? So the good thing is, though, that what I have found and really feel convinced about is that for each of us, the subconscious part of the mind records everything that we experience. And it records even those things that have happened that we have not been consciously aware of. So that means these encounters, these abductions, that every detail that happens in them is being recorded by the subconscious part of our mind, whether we are aware of it or not. And that's where regression comes in. And regression is just a great gift, I think, to us, that we have the ability to do this. To be regressed is just to be in a nice state of deep relaxation, which I help each person to do. It's a pleasure to help people get into that deep state of relaxation. And during the relaxation process, I'm reminding the mind of the person I'm working with, reminding about that experience that they have wanted to know more details about. And then when they are nice and deeply relaxed, I say, okay, you are there now at that time when that happened. And I mention the year, sometimes even the specific date and the location where the person was, where it seemed like that unusual experience began or the missing time experience happened. And we just go right through the details as if the person is reliving it, as if the person is there back in time now. And that's much more effective, I have found, than having somebody sort of remember it in the past tense. So it's more like, oh, I am now. Oh, I feel myself being floated up from the bed and floated across the room. And there are these two beings over on my right and one over on the left. And, we're going through the wall and I'm out in the air and going up and now I'm in the ship, So it really, I think it's much more detailed and authentic when they have a sense of really reliving it. And that too is wonderful that we have the ability to do that. So, there are so many things that happen in these experiences. And sometimes people are just taught not for any medical reason or physical reason, but are taught simply or taken to be taught. So many people are taught psychic skills, all the range of psychic abilities that they did not have before, but they're taught and coached by the beings who use these abilities all the time. And sometimes they're taught about the cosmos or about other civilizations out there. Sometimes they're given perspective from the beings, perspective on life on Earth from their perspective. For instance, one of the extraterrestrial beings at one point said that the Earth is absolutely precious because it is the only one really of its kind. There are some that are similar in some ways, but definitely not in all aspects. And one of the things that is amazing to them is that the planet Earth has more species on it than all of the planets in existence in this universe and other universes. If you add up all those species that live on those planets, they do not match as many species as we have on this one planet Earth. So that is certainly a reason to be very interested in the Earth because we are unique in that way. And they say that there are many, many planets that do have life, and some of them have quite a number of different life forms. We might call them animals, but they don't have nearly the amount of species that we have, and subspecies and subspecies that we have on Earth. And we really are quite an amazing place. And also, they are very interested in us because many of those groups of extraterrestrial beings have helped to genetically create who we are. Even back at the beginning, there were some of those beings that their species helped to create humans from earlier forms of life. And so they kind of think of us, some of them, as their relatives, like their little cousins or their little brothers or little grandchildren. And they continue to have a really vivid interest in us. And some people feel that now that they have been receiving extraterrestrial genetics, which brings me to the subject of ET human hybrids, which I have put a lot of attention into and have co-written a book about called Meet the Hybrids with Miguel Mendonça from England. Thank you. I see you're holding up that book. And that is telling about the ET human hybrids who are living right here amongst us on Earth and doing wonderful, wonderful work. I think they are really a gift to humanity. And I know the 8 of them very well who we wrote about in Meet the Hybrids. And also I've met and had long conversations with and done regressions with, quite a number of other people too, whom it certainly seems authentically that they are hybrids as well. And then, of course, we could say that we all, you and I and everybody in the world, are hybrids because way, way back in time, and, who knows how many years exactly, but thousands of years, that the human race was manipulated genetically or whatever, original life forms with a lot of their genetics and came out as human beings, the ones that we are now. So I think that when that idea first started coming out several years ago, I don't know, maybe a decade or 2 ago, people seemed to be, at least people I knew, seemed to be very uncomfortable with that idea. Either some people thought that, all humans are just created by God, and other people thought, oh no, it's just a process of evolution, as Darwin was perpetrating. But it may not, it may be a combination of all of the above, but I do think that the extraterrestrials, had a tremendous amount to do with us becoming who we are. And of course, that gives them a really good reason to continue to be interested in us in a number of ways. There are also lots of hybrids who are born from humans. Well, I have to say that a little bit differently. There are human hybrid children. That is human -ET hybrid children who many experiencers are finding out about that they have. In other words, as you may very well be aware, it often happens that eggs will be taken from a woman, even when she is a little girl. They may be taken from her or any age up till about middle of life. And sperm can be taken from a boy or a grown male. And then that is combined by the extraterrestrial beings in a little, I kind of imagine it being like a petri dish. Anyway, they do combine it together, and then they mix in their genetics. And sometimes it will be from one extraterrestrial species, but more often in the cases that I know about, it's a mixture of genetics from a few different kinds of extraterrestrial beings who all cooperate and work together. So in other words, that becomes an embryo with the human sperm, human eggs, and extraterrestrial genetics. And then that is put into the woman from whom they took the eggs, put into her uterus, and is allowed to gestate as we gestate our embryos for a month and a half or 2.5 months. And then that material is taken from her. She may or may not be aware of it, probably usually isn't aware of it. And then that little embryo is gestated in a tank on the ship. And after the appropriate number of months, that baby is born, that is, taken out of the tank on the ship and raised on the ship. And those hybrids usually are not nearly human enough or human enough physiologically to be able to live here on Earth. They wouldn't be able to withstand our viruses or our bacteria or digest our food. And they also look different enough that it would be difficult for them to be accepted here. So those hybrids, and there must be millions of them, are living on the spaceships or on other planets. But then there is the kind of planets that we've written about in Meet the Hybrids, where the mother is either already pregnant with a human child from a human father, and then about the 5th or 6th month of the pregnancy, she will be taken and with a hypodermic type of needle, she's injected with the genetics from the extraterrestrial beings. They're right through the wall of her abdomen and the wall of the uterus and into the fetus. And so that fetus, that child, is hybridized at that point from those beings. And that kind of hybrid is born right here the way that we do and is raised here, raised by a family and grows up and lives a regular life like the rest of us do. And I would like to mention the other way that we know of for creating this kind of hybrid, and that is that they will take the sperm from the father, the eggs from the mother, mix it together with their genetics, making an embryo, and then they will place that embryo in the mother's body and leave it there. It gestates full terms and is born here as a hybrid child. So all of these hybrids have a lot in common with each other in that they all expressed that they felt that their mother and father, even though they might be a perfectly nice mother and father, their mother and father weren't their real family, and that their real family was somehow out in space. And they, even as very little children, they'd go out and look up at the sky and say, "Where are you, my real family?" Of course, their families here didn't like hearing that, naturally, but anyway, it's a very, very strong feeling on the part of these beings because they have the extraterrestrial genetics in them. And they all felt really different from everybody else, even though they may not look different particularly, but and they all had a number of psychic skills that nobody else in the family had, and nobody else at school seemed to have the kinds of abilities that they did. And so they, always felt a little bit out of it, although seemingly perfectly natural in other ways. And so their lives were different, than that of most children or even of their siblings. That they just felt so different. But they always felt from a very young age that they are here for a reason. They are here to help. And of course, it may have taken some decades to really know what that help would be, what their skills would be, even though they had these psychic skills, and very often they had the ability to heal with their hands, heal other children, other family members, pets, and would just naturally just be drawn to doing that healing. And it was just a wonderful thing. And people would sometimes be in amazement. But you see, nobody realizing consciously that these were hybrids. Even the hybrids themselves didn't really know why they were so different. Didn't know that they were hybrids until they were usually in their young adult years. And it got very, very validated by the beings. So the beings who gave them their genetics visited these people, these children, and as they grew up too, visited them very frequently, because indeed they felt like family in that they had some of the same genetics. And so these hybrid people have always really welcomed the extraterrestrial visitors with that feeling that, oh, this is my family member. And so the beings were always very loving with them, and even more loving, they felt, unconditionally loving, often more than they felt from their own families. Because, of course, the families were trying to raise them and were having to say no to certain things and give them approval or not approval for their behavior. Whereas the visiting beings, the extraterrestrial beings, were just unconditionally loving them and accepting them for exactly who they are. Never mind about behavior. We just love you. So, of course, that was very welcomed by these people. And these hybrid people have all grown up to really recognize that they are here for service, and they are here, the basic overriding meaning is that they are here to raise the consciousness of humanity. And so they do teaching and coaching and counseling and writing and speaking and workshops and courses and so forth. So they are really, that is what their work is, to help to raise the consciousness of humanity and help us to get ready for the process of ascension, and help us to know about the other beings, not only the ones that they came from and have the genetics of, but just all of the beings, in the cosmos, of which there are so many. So I think that we're very fortunate to have these people with us, really giving and serving and teaching. And all the ones that I've met are just absolutely lovely, wonderful people whom you'd be very happy to know.